Now, in my first video about this configuration, the one in front of me, which you can check out here, I talked about the media consumption experience and the productivity implications of having literally 8 feet of monitor in front of you. Then I committed to follow up with you guys with a part 2 video where I just dug into the gaming performance of this bad boy of a setup. It took a while, just like part 3 of mineral oil, which I promise is coming next week, so make sure you're subscribed so you don't miss it. But at long last, I took some advice from you guys, some advice from Skip over at Widescreen Gaming Forum, and I found a nice cross-section of games from different genres to throw at it to investigate the performance of our system at this mondo resolution and how games react to being stretched, in some cases, over 3 times wider than they were ever intended. In fact, in most cases, over 3 times wider than they were intended. The Cooler Master Neptune 240M features an exclusive pump design and their new Silencio fans to provide impressive near-silent performance. Click now to learn more. 14.86 megapixels. That is the pixel count of our triple surround curved 34-inch monitor setup from LG. We're talking about a surface here that is just slightly harder to drive than even the brand new 5K iMac Retina display kajigger thing that Apple recently released. And when you consider that even high-end gaming PCs these days are only really designed to operate from about 1080p up to 4K at the max, expecting them to not to buckle when we throw 7 times the resolution of 1080p at a gaming rig seems a little unreasonable. So we needed more than just a high-end PC. We built the Autobahn Hammer, equipped with a Core i7-5930K at 4.7 gigahertz, AIO liquid cooling, a 1500 watt power supply, and 32 gigs of Dominator Platinum DDR4 RAM from Corsair, an Asus Rampage 5 Extreme motherboard, and the centerpiece, 3 Sapphire VaporX Radeon R9 290X 8 gig graphics cards running in Crossfire. Why 8 gigs, you might ask? Well, when you scale raw GPU power by adding more cards, you are still stuck with the amount of RAM of a single card. So the only way to kit out our 3-way setup with more RAM was to use cards that have more each in the first place. So let's start with the games that deliver a great ultra-widescreen experience. Dirt Showdown is almost the perfect poster child here for how awesome this gaming setup can be. The resolution just shows up in the menus, it runs great, averaging 52 FPS at Ultra with 2 times MSAA, and while it doesn't render the game with multiple cameras to eliminate stretching on the side monitors, it handles this better than most single camera games, with only the outside 15% or so where you'll rarely be looking anyway being unpleasantly distorted. The next one is iRacing, the popular online racing sim. This one could earn poster child status too, if not for the small rendering errors in the protective cage on the left and the harnesses on the right. Menus were perfect, field of view adjustments are handled with a simple hotkey in-game, and being surrounded by the cockpit with a very wide field of view legitimately makes it feel more like you're in a vehicle. It also ran very well at around 80 FPS at max, with mirrors enabled, 2048 by 2048 textures, and all the RAM sliders cranked. The next game type, and games where you sit in a cockpit being good for surround is definitely a pattern at this point, that can benefit from our surround setup, is Star Citizen. But as we discovered, whether it's an optimization issue, a bottleneck elsewhere in the system, or just the sheer demand of running it at this resolution, Star Citizen ran at 8 FPS in the racing module at low, and then curiously ran at 8 FPS at very high. The game isn't released yet, so they've got time, but while the menu system wasn't perfect, at least everything was visible on screen, which is an excellent starting point. Our next game is Civilization Beyond Earth, and this is a bit of a unique one in that it's the only top-down view game that we're running, and it's a mantle title, and that it also features an unusual crossfire mode thanks to the way that Mantle allows game devs to leverage the GPU or GPUs more directly than has been possible in the past. So instead of each GPU rendering alternating frames, the GPUs divide up the workload and each renders part of the same frame. Neato. The game looks beautiful and runs at just over 30 FPS at medium settings in the worst case scenario built-in benchmark with a massive amount of terrain visible on screen. And that's fine for a turn-based game, but the experience really wasn't that great to actually play it because UI elements are so spread out to the left and the right that I found myself getting very frustrated. This could be addressed with a patch though, and not all top-down games will have this issue. Our second Mantle game, I mean, you gotta try to leverage those 290Xs somehow, right, is Dragon Age Inquisition. Third-person view games tend to handle widescreen better than a lot of other genres, and even though Dragon Age Inquisition renders from only one camera angle, causing stretching on about the outer half of the outside monitors, it ran at about 31 FPS at high with ultra textures using the built-in benchmark. It kept all the UI elements on the center monitor where they can be more easily accessed, and it makes a reasonable case for widescreen gaming. One of my favorite games to test with, well, anything, is Tomb Raider 2013, and it handled this setup really well as well. As another third-person game, it required no FOV adjustments, it leverages multi-GPU configurations extraordinarily well. Man, that game's well optimized. So the game was playable at around 48 FPS at very high with Tress effects enabled, and other than the usual single camera issue of objects appearing to be nearer to you than they actually are in your peripheral vision, it ran flawlessly. Shadow of Mordor, I threw in just as an interesting case study. It allows me to demonstrate some of the issues that can occur when trying to run games in any multi-monitor setup, let alone a super ultra mega wide one like this, because even with the brilliant flawless widescreen utility by Hayden, the game itself runs okay, but the menus are completely impossible to navigate, and the other cool thing about this game is that it's super easy to create a very demanding scenario for GPU VRAM with their Ultra texture pack. So running Shadow of Mordor at whatever settings I was running at that one time I got it working with ultra textures, I have no idea. I mean, it was spanned across the monitors, it looked really good, frame rate was balls around 30 FPS, and average performance was over 4 gigs of VRAM per GPU. The only time that happened where we would have actually needed more than a 4 gig GPU, I wasn't able to verify anything because I couldn't navigate the menus, so yeah. I only ran one FPS game because frankly, first-person shooters are not a great genre for this kind of setup in general, and they're just mostly not made for it too. Valve games are about as seamless an experience as you can expect to have with launcher